Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. So today we are doing the Getting Started as a Game Animator webinar, and this is all going to be about how to get started as a game animator. So today our guest speaker is going to be Luke Madden, and he's going to be going over all of this cool topic for the next hour. After that, we're going to have another half hour for any questions that you might have regarding Animation Mentor or the school or any of our programs. And that's going to be hosted by Tim and Mars, who are our student success coaches here at AM. So that's enough about me. I'll let Luke take over here and jump right into our talk.
Excellent. I'll just start by sharing my screen and we'll get it all going. Share my screen, show my webinar so I can see everyone, and let me get my presenter view. Excellent. Okay. If that's working for everyone, then we'll just get going. So this is the Getting Started as a Game Animator little webinar. I thought I'd put this together just to kind of show people the basics that I would expect people pick up if you want to get started as an animator in games. So to begin with, who am I? So my name is Luke Madden. I'm an animator originally from Ireland. I live in the UK now, working for a company called NDreams, a game studio. I've worked in games since about 2017, where I first started working for Ubisoft. I've since worked in films and TV, and now I'm back to games. And this January, I'll actually be doing the game animation combat class at Animation Mentor. So if there's people who, want to be taught by me, then there's spots open. I'll just talk about what we're going to go over today. Hopefully you've seen it in the description, but we'll just cover it one more time. Make sure I changed on the right screen. So this presentation is about tips, tricks, best practices for what I would call like a game-ready showreel to land your first job in the games industry. We're going to go over things like the basic list of animations that I would expect someone to have on a showreel if they're applying for a game studio. I know this because I applied to probably 500 game studios, so I think I've got a pretty good idea of what it took to get in the door. I want to go over how to approach creating these animations to give them personality and character rather than just a cycle and showing different poses. We want to inject character always, be able to tell stories with your animations. I want to go over presentation tips on the best way to show it off, because there's no point in making some beautiful animation and then showing it off poorly and you're not giving it its best chance to succeed. I also want to go over something that I think isn't talked about a lot when you in like kind of various online circles, which is how you have to think to be a game animator. So how you would look at a problem, break it down in a studio, and the kind of things that you would need to bring to the table as a games animator. So one of the things I want to try and avoid in this talk, and I might have accidentally done it a few times, but I want to let you up front, I'm trying to avoid it, is I want to keep it fairly free of any specific software, specific engine, because there's many, many ways that everything can be done in games. There's no wrong way. There's some screenshots from Maya in this. That's just because that's what I have. So like I said, there's many, many ways you can do something. So anything you see me say here today is not me saying this is the correct and only way to do something. This is just the way that I've been shown how to do it, the way I've found success with. And that's another thing I want to kind of bring to this talk is finding a workflow that works for you. I think it's one of the most important things in finding your groove, like as a professional animator, is finding something that works for you again and again and again, rather than just doing something because that's what you were told. So I'll just jump onto the next slide, which is the checklist. So you'll see here on the left, these are the kind of the 6 things that I would expect on a entry-level animation reel for a junior animator or a apprentice or whatever. So we're going to talk about idles. We're going to talk about a walk cycle, the run cycle, a jump, an attack/attack combo, and then some mocap cleanup. Um, Before we jump into any of those, if you're trying to make a reel, obviously you need to make a reel. You need animation rigs. So getting a rig that you just find online is great for showing things off in Maya. But if you want to show things off in a game engine, there's some very specific things that that rig needs to have. You'd usually see it online labeled as game ready. So I want to just go over one or two things that make something a game ready rig, so you know to keep an eye out, um, and why a rig that you find online you like might not work when you try to bring it into Unreal or Epic or Unity. I promised I wouldn't focus, but um, so I've just taken this screenshot from one of the AM rigs that you get on the games course, Sparrow. So what we usually see on normal rigs will be, a skeleton and some really fancy rigging. On a games rig, you have all that, but you also have a kind of another skeleton underneath that's built in a very specific way, usually under a hierarchy that is all under a root. Um, all the names have to be very specific, and basically when you export your animation, it'll all get baked onto this rig, which then gets sent to the engine, which the engine knows how to interpret and play back for you. Without this intermediary skeleton, nothing's going to happen. So usually a game ready rig will have a nice fancy rig and also this skeleton under a root. The root is very, very important in games. It's usually what tells the engine where to put like the capsule and the collision object and the physics, and so the root is very important. We can't we won't survive without a root in games. So now that we've solved the rig, I want to jump into the idles, the first thing that I would expect on a game's reel. So before the idle animation, we have the idle pose. Basically, obviously, it's the initial pose. It's probably the thing that a player is going to see the most of in your game that you're making, or your vertical slice. But let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that we're making a game. We need to find a pose that has a strong silhouette that portrays our character, not just a character standing still. So I've done a little example here of just a character standing like a person might stand, and a character standing in a more characterful way that sort of gives you an idea of what their intentions are to the player, which is also very important. This is from a specific game angle, just like a third-person action RPG game. A way to think about creating your idle, because a lot of people will make idle animations of just and they'll just move the chest and the shoulders, and it'll be a breathing cycle, basically. I don't want people to make idles thinking about it being a breathing cycle, because you lose a lot of opportunities to make interesting idles. I want you to think about what your character would do if they were doing nothing as that character. It's it's a difficult idea to wrap your head around, but once you kind of start thinking about how your character should be, it becomes much easier than just being like, I'm just going to put my character in a pose and make them breathe, because we lose a lot of opportunities for injecting character. They should be breathing probably, unless they're like a robot character or something like that. But that comes after the idle has been created. So when we're making idles, I would recommend you make them at least 10 seconds, because if the character stood on screen for a long period of time, we don't really want to be able to spot the point where the loop happens every time, because you're going to laser in on it and you're going to not be able to not see it anymore. You can add things like head turns and head scratches and weight shifts as what's called in games like an idle break or a fidget. Those can be brought in the engine after a period of time. A random animation is selected that starts and finishes with your idle pose, and it's just a little break out of this longer idle that shouldn't be too distracting. Let me just make sure I've mentioned everything I want to mention on this one. So one other thing is, obviously, we have a game camera usually, So you want to make sure that your idle is a strong pose, looks good from the game camera, but also that it's balanced from every angle. So we can never be sure what angle a character will be seen from, especially if it's a multiplayer game. It's going to be seen from every single angle. So it can't be look like it's made too much to camera, which we can get away with in like film and TV. In games, everything has to look good from every angle, basically. Um, so that I think covers like just some basic tips on creating an idle, things to remember. The thing to definitely take away is this fourth paragraph. Uh, your character doing nothing. Um, it's an important thing to think about when trying to create an idle or when you're trying to film reference. You have to get into character rather than just say, I'm making a game, so it doesn't matter. It always matters. Okay. So we'll move on to the walk.
We do have a couple questions
Oh, yeah.
just regarding that topic there.
Yes.
One here was you mentioned the silhouettes and that we have to be conscious of the silhouette from every angle because in many games you can rotate the camera.
Hmm.
Is there something that you consider while doing that? Because at some point the silhouette probably won't work at certain angles. So are there like specifics that you feel are more important, or what do you do and what do you think about when trying to get that clear silhouette across multiple angles?
Yeah. So you would usually try to like in a game you have your kind of master camera. So let's say like even this example here is like a third person game. This is a terribly framed, obviously, but you would usually have your master camera that will be controlled by the player, but there's always a kind of a set position the camera will come back to. That's going to be priority one. Priority two will be sort of the 45s to that kind of region of if you're panning your camera around, you want to just try and avoid anything occluding itself. And remember, like poses are 3D. So just because like something can work in many, many angles, it doesn't have to be heavily biased towards one. It can work from every angle, but it would probably be if it's a single player game, just your prioritize your main camera and then probably the two kind of extremes of maybe 45 to 60 degrees either side, um, as if a player was kind of turning around and moving the camera as they go. Um, but it's really up to your kind of gameplay that you're going with. Try to think about what would a player do the most. Then, you know, focus in on those specific sections. And then again, we can add another layer on top of that with multiplayer games where it can be seen from every angle. Then it becomes a whole other conversation because it can literally be any angle. So just try your best to like balance, I think is key. As long as something is doesn't look unbalanced, it's going to look pretty good. So if you can hit 100% of angles look great, great. If you can hit 85%, great. Just try to hit as many as you possibly can, but don't worry if you can't hit them all because it's very rare.
Cool. So it's mostly just thinking of which game you're creating for this and what would the player experience the most out of it.
Yes, I think
Nice.
when you're creating things for your reel, try to have a specific thing in mind that you want it to be for because it'll help focus your work rather than just saying I'm just making game animations. It's like, well, that's a huge topic.
And then we have one more question here that's about the rigs that you were mentioning earlier.
Hmm.
You mentioned that the rigs, we need the game ready version,
Hmm.
and it has to have that skeleton. Is that game ready rig agnostic to any game engine, or do rigs also have to be engine specific as well when
You,
students are looking for their own rigs to add?
usually not. Usually they're if something can be brought into it like Unity, it'll probably work in Unreal as well, in my experience. Um, Now, having said that, I don't want that to come back and bite me. I've never experienced them not working in one or the other. Getting it into the engine might be a different method, but I think they should work across them both. Don't quote me
Awesome.
on that.
Cool. Yeah, that's what we've got so far.
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to jump into the walk. These are just a few tips on walk cycles, some really jazzy screenshots here as well. So the walk cycle after the idle animation is probably going to be the second most seen thing. I mean, depending on your game. Let's just say a locomotion cycle for the sake of argument. Um, don't be afraid to spend a lot of time getting this looking really, really good. Like, don't be like, I have to get into the cooler stuff like the attacks. Like, this is the stuff that the foundation that your character is built on. Trying to figure out how your character walks in character is also a huge deal to be able to get your head around. Um, so this isn't so much about like the specifics of how I would go through creating it, but there's a few little tips in here that I wanted to mention that I've noticed a lot when I'm like reviewing reels or helping people in work. Um, one of the things that usually comes up is leg popping, like knee popping, when you're trying to create your first walk cycle. It can be really difficult to avoid the knees just looking like they're kind of just jittering everywhere. Try as hard as you can to not use the extra like little IK effectors and things like that that might come with your rig to keep the leg bent when you think it should be bent and keep it straight when you think it could be straight. Because in my experience, if the body mechanics are correct, there will not be knee popping. So if you see knee popping, it means either you haven't fully rotated a hip enough, or you haven't shifted the weight enough, or you haven't stretched, or you've stretched the leg too much, or you haven't stretched it enough. By stretch, I mean straightened it, not stretched the limbs, because famously games don't really like that either. Um, so like I said, if you're struggling with the popping of joints, we'll cover this a little bit more in the next slide as well. But just try to come back to your mechanics, try to refine them, try to be able to identify what is not working. I find something that helps. I'm going a bit off script here, but it's I think it's helpful. Something that helps is try to get into the mindset of reviewing your work like you're helping someone else. So when you're reviewing your own work, it can be quite difficult because to nail down what's wrong, but try to look at your animation as if someone else has sent it to you and said, "Can you give me some notes on this?" I think that's really helpful to be able to take a step back and be like, okay, frame this, this is wrong, frame this is wrong, frame this could use a bit of work. That will help you with your mechanics. You can do things like flipping it and stuff like that, flipping the video. Um, but yeah, so carrying on with just some random tips that I think have helped me throughout my career. Uh, we need to be able to nail down the foot speed to walk speed relationship so we don't have any foot sliding. Some of the ways you can do this to test it and make sure it's working all right would be, so this curve, I'm not sure if you can see my blue highlight on the screen in the share, but there's, so in the top picture, we see just an auto tangent. That would be usually if I set my foot in the first extreme of it contacting the ground and then it moving all the way to the back. If you didn't do anything to those two frames in between, it would go slow, fast, slow. Obviously, this won't work if a character is walking at a constant speed. We'll get some sliding either at the start, middle, or end, and it won't look very good, and it'll kind of immediately remove you from what you're like the kind of the suspension of disbelief. Um, we usually want that line to look like this, a constant straight line. Um, then when we know that speed, either you'll know your character's walk speed going in and you can tailor this to be that, or you'll take this and make that your character's walk speed. Then there can be no sliding. What you can do is take this relationship, so like say 1.5 to minus 1.5 over X number of frames, and then apply that to your character's main control node in Maya, and then take the curves, set it to post infinity cycle with offset, and it'll just walk forever. It'll just move forever through your scene. If you want to, you're like, oh, I need to just see it on the spot again. You can just mute in your channel box. You can just mute that channel. It'll go back to the spot. It'll never move off it. Fix up your animation. unmute it, see it walking, see if it's popping, see if it's sliding, and you can just keep going back and forth like that. Um, I think it's a really helpful way to kind of flick between to seeing it moving off the spot and moving it off the spot and on the spot, because sometimes they'll look like two entirely different walk cycles when they're moving and when they're on the spot. You might have be like, I've absolutely nailed this on the spot, and then it'll walk off it, and you'd be like, oh my God, I need to start again. Um, don't don't panic. Everything can be fixed like that. um, so hopefully there's something helpful there for everyone on the walk cycle. We're going to jump into, well, we're not going to jump, we're going to run into the run cycle. So same as the walk, I just want to cover some kind of tips and tricks and things that I've picked up along the way. Like with the walk, sliding is very important. It's a little bit easier to get away with sliding in a run because it's usually so fast that any sliding, unless it's really, really aggressive, will be kind of hidden. But knee popping is something that'll usually ruin it. So I'll just cover knee popping a bit more because it's going to be the bane of your existence for a good few years while you're still learning to animate. So knee popping usually happens when like a joint. So let's say it's usually a knee, because that's the thing we see the most. Could be elbows, could be anything. Is when it goes either from bent to straight to bent over as many frames, or the other way around, or if it sticks in world space in your kind of relative view and then suddenly jumps forwards or backwards. So, like I said, if the mechanics are correct, this shouldn't happen. So whenever you see it, try to avoid pulling things around with IK points on the knees or the elbows, or pinning things. Just go back to your mechanics, look at the hips, look at the relationship of the height off the ground. How far is your foot reaching? Is my weight shifted correctly? Things like that. When you're doing a run cycle, because a lot of times they can be less than 50, it can be 15 frames or less. You can feel quite hard to not have everything happen on the same frame. Like with a longer animation, you can offset things and things can feel like they have influence and like lead and follow. With a run, it can feel quite challenging to do that. But if you get comfortable setting your keys to infinity, making sure you have set start and end keys, because if you don't, the wrong thing might be set to infinity, and it's quite difficult to retrace your steps to figure out what exactly went wrong when you've not noticed it for 25 minutes as you're animating, and then you go, oh no. So getting comfortable with setting things to infinity and then nudging entire curves along the timeline, that'll help you make things feel much more organic and kind of natural. When you do get your run cycle into like your game engine as you're setting up your state machines and things like that, something that a lot of kind of more beginner animators forget or don't consider is adding some leans to your character's run. They'll just have it staying perfectly upright and then turning around in corners. So figuring out how to add an additive lean to a character run cycle will make it feel much more real, much more grounded, and much more weighty, because you're having to use the character's momentum to keep it upright rather than just staying pencil straight as it speeds through the world. And then carrying on with the weight, animating a fast run on a heavy character, like a big, like heavy enemy and things like that, can feel quite difficult. You can be like, well, it's impossible. I can't animate a heavy character running in like less than X many frames. So something to think about is the idea that heavy things can move quickly. It's just they can't change directions quickly. So that should help you kind of recognize the moments where you can really ramp up the speed of something, but you just have to know that after you ramp it up, there's going to be a heavy slowdown, a pause, possibly a change of direction, rather than just something moving fast, stopping, moving fast. So that's that's the run covered. Like I said, these are just kind of random tips that I think have helped me and should help you. Uh,
We do have some questions regarding the
yes,
walk run.
excellent.
Uh, so one of the questions here is, do you have any tips regarding making transitions between a walk and a run? Is that something that should be done in a demo reel? Should we go from walk into run? Should they be separate? And if so, how would we transition that? And for anyone who is unsure what we're talking about, in video games, walks and runs typically are blended by the game engine.
Hmm.
But if you're doing your own reel, should that be something that you mimic if you're just animating in something like Maya or Blender?
Yes, I mean the more data that you can add into your reel, and we say as data because a lot of times you're adding things in engines, a lot of things are done with blends. So I wouldn't say that was done with data, but you adding more yourself that's authored in your software will only help bring quality and kind of control to your demo reel and show thought and show input, which is really key to everything. Um, a really good tip actually that I saw a few years ago from Jonathan Cooper, a Scottish animator. He worked on like a lot of Assassin's Creed and things like that. Um, I think the video he showed this on was definitely that. But a really nice tip for blending between a walk and a run, or even a jog and a sprint, was adding a little speed boost. So when you press your run button or you press your sprint button, your character gets a burst of speed and a really heavy lean into the sprint, and then they can kind of settle into their run. Um, that's quite a nice way to mask the change in gait and give the player feeling like there's like been a hard like jump in intensity, which is what you want from a sprint or a run. But yes, if you could animate those, excellent. Definitely add those in, and don't be afraid to call it out. Don't just put them in and say, "Oh, I presume the person reviewing this will see that." Like, have something on the screen say, like, showing the animations that you've done, highlighting each one, saying, "This is the run. Here's the run transition. Here's the run stop to walk." Anything you can show to show your understanding of how the system should work will only stand to your favor, basically.
That's awesome. I really like that part about the speed boost because now that you mention it, it's like I've seen that in so many games and it
Yeah.
does add so much to it.
Yeah, I wish I could remember exactly where I saw it, but I was definitely Jonathan Cooper I saw it. So shout out Jonathan.
And then we have another question here regarding root motion. When you're doing a walk or run cycle, is that something where root motion is very important? Or is that something that we worry about in engine?
so it's a really good question. Something I definitely should have included on this, and maybe I'll Photoshop it in afterwards so it looks like I didn't forget. Um, yes, so I would when I'm authoring an animation in my motion builder, whatever, I wouldn't be concerned about what the root is doing at all because you're going to get bogged down. Like when we animate like step by step. Don't worry about what the root's doing because that will come in at the end before you export it. But as you're doing it, don't worry about it. Right before you export it, what I normally do is I would parent the root to say the character's hips. Keep it on the ground, but parent it say Z if your character's running forwards. It's translation Z. Don't worry about the rotations for just a run, and then plot your animation, bake it, export it. Um, this is for if you've say taken your character's moving off the spot. If your character is running in a cycle, just make sure it stays directly under their hips, and then when it's in game, the character won't be running off the spot on the route stuck at world zero. You want everything to be the same basically. Um, so yeah, it is important, but don't worry about it. It's a very easy thing to solve.
That's awesome. And then we have one last question here for the moment regarding what you were mentioning on the knees and avoiding that stretch.
Mhm.
Um, in video games and in game engines, you mentioned that they don't like having a lot of stretch. if you're trying to go for a more squash and stretch animation, is that something you should try to avoid when working for game animations or adding into your game animations? Or is that something that just depends on the game itself? And is there a threshold?
Yeah, so it definitely depends on the game. It depends on the style of the game, and it depends on like the ability of, well, not the ability, that's a bad word. It's more the intention of like the designers of the game. Um, but if you want to aim for that, by all means do it. It's just something that a lot of softwares that are built around games can struggle with sometimes. So, for example, if you're doing a lot, I mean, motion builder famously will not stretch anything. It's terrible at interpreting any bones that aren't like completely rigid. Um, but when you're trying to build like a more cartoony style, like League of Legends style, there's a lot of stretch in those games, but they're it's considered and it's built into the animation system. It's built into their rigs, but a lot of rigs the specific skeleton might not allow it. So just yeah, keep it in mind and try to like being a game animator. There's a lot of technical work that goes into it. So if you come up against an issue and you're like, oh my rig doesn't stretch, try and figure it out. It'll only help if you can say, hey, look, this rig did not do this, and then I made it do it.
That's
uh,
awesome.
any game studio go, we want that person.
Awesome. That's all we've got so far.
Great. I hope I didn't ramble too much on that last
Oh
one,
no,
but
that was perfect.
so I'll just quickly go through this jump one. It's not as it's not as in depth as this text may make it seem. um, I just want to go over the idea of how you break down an animation in your head that may seem pretty straightforward. We're going to go into this much more in a second, but for this one, so when we're animating a jump, we'll just animate the jump. The character will anticipate, lean down, explode off the ground, hit the apex, fall to the ground, land. But when we want to bring that into an engine, we can't always be sure how far the player might want to jump, how high they might want to jump. Maybe it's tied to how hard they press the button, the speed they jump at, that will make them stay in the air for longer, and a specifically authored jump will just look really weird. So usually what we'll have a takeoff animation that might get you some way off the ground, then an idle animation in the air that'll be kind of something like the character's apex pose with a bit of motion so that it can kind of sell the character moving through the air, and then you'll have a landing animation. This could be, depending on how you make it, some games will have the landing animation that's from just off the ground, or some will be right when the character's touching the ground, then they'll just play a landing animation. You'd be surprised at how much is hidden that you just kind of you fill in with your brain, like, oh, that was a really cool land animation. There never was one. It was just the idle all the way till they touched the ground, and then they gave you like an impact pose, and you just went, yeah, that was a landing animation. You've been tricked. Happens a lot in games, and it's really fun when you can do things like that. Um, so like I said, not a lot to go into on the jump. I just wanted to mention that, animations will be authored with something in mind about how we're going to chop it up. It's going to come in the combat section in a second as well. Um, but yeah, so just things to keep in mind that when you're animating your jump, think about that top pose because you're going to be animating an idle for that probably at some point when you chop it up. Uh, yeah. Oh yeah, and one more thing I wanted to mention here: you might see this phrase DCC tool as you're going through. Maybe you're looking up tutorials online, things like that. DCC means digital content creation tool. People usually will use it referring to Maya, Blender, Motion Builder, just so they can differentiate between that tool and say a game engine. So like if something was created, like was that made in DCC or was that made in Unreal? Things like that. Um, just a nice word. I think I worked in games for about 4 years. I used to just use it. I didn't know what it was. I heard people use it. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, this was made in DCC. I don't know what that meant. but I eventually did, and then now you all do too. Uh, so we'll jump into the combat. So this one is just, I mean, this is an animation I made a few years ago just for fun. Um, but I thought it was a good thing to show. It's just going to keep looping here as we talk about the various things you should be thinking about when you're animating your combat. Um, so when I say combat on a reel, I would hope you have a combat combo. So that would usually be like a light attack, a heavy attack, a finishing move, or two light attacks and a heavy attack all chained together. Um, these can be made individually or animated as one and then broken up. I would usually make it as one, but as you're making it, know that at certain points, this is going to be where if the player doesn't press another button, I'm going to go back to idle. And you have those kind of checkpoints along the way. You can kind of see them in this animation. There's a few little pauses where you can go, yeah, if they didn't press another button, that's when it would go back to idle. Um, so something else we want to look at is the arcs in the attack. So I always want there to be some amount of diagonal in an attack, never just straight horizontal or vertical. Some amount of diagonal, even if it's only slight, will give us a lot more coverage when we're trying on the engine side to detect if you hit the thing you were trying to hit. We just want to be able to get, every single pixel we can of coverage in case something goes wrong and you like, well, I swung and I hit him and the engine just didn't do anything. We want to try and help as much as we can when doing that. So always try to add, and plus it's just a little bit more interesting when you see something that's not completely vertical or horizontal. Um, Something else that can actually help with the hit detection is trails, weapon trails. So I've just put in one in Maya here, but in like Unreal or Unity, there's like lots of VFX packs that you can get that will add trails onto your weapons, and they do actually serve a function of the game. On a lot of games, that will also have like hit detection and damage on it. Like the weapon will not be the thing that does damage; it'll be the trail because the trail lasts for so much longer in the attack. If there's some lag or something like that, and you don't make contact with the thing you want to hit in that kind of 5 frames that the engine needs to check, the trail will last a lot longer and it'll be like, oh yes, they did actually hit the thing. But adding them in can look cooler, and like a flaming sword is better than a sword. That's just a fact. Um, and it serves a design function. So showing that you understand that is another key thing of becoming a game animator. Um, so consider your game camera. So this is an animation I made where, going back to the idle, I wanted all these poses to work from 3 angles. I thought it was a really difficult challenge that I set myself, and halfway through I was like, why did I do this? But I really wanted the animation to be readable and look like it was specifically made for each of these 3 game cameras. And I didn't touch it in between any of them. I just got 3 cameras and set it up. But consider your specific game camera when you're animating your attacks. The poses should read, um, and they should give the anticipation that you need. So even if it's a third-person game, you're going to need to give warning to the other player so they can dodge or parry or get that empowerment that we're trying to give them. Um, and then one more thing is just more of a presentation tip is try to give context for what you're doing in the world, whether that be kind of an environment setup, so little kind of like props and scenario and like trees or huts or things like that, or even like I've got here from a plugin called Awesome Lights, where it just gives me a checkered floor, so you can see the camera and the character moving through the world rather than just being gray on gray, in which case you can't really tell if they're moving, if they're sliding, and it's just a little bit more interesting to look at. So yeah, that would be my tips on game combat for your reel. One
That's really
more.
cool. There is a question here regarding
Yes.
the combat. You mentioned making it interesting and dynamic and snappy. Uh, do you pay attention to whether the animation should be for an enemy combatant or a player combatant? So, for example, in video games, typically the player is going to have more quick and dynamic timing so that you don't get that kind of lag when you hit the
Yes.
button, whereas an enemy will wind up more to give the player time to dodge out of the way.
Yes.
Is that something that is good to showcase on your reel?
Yes. You pretty much answered it in the question. So that's excellent. Yeah. So a lot of times you'll want a player input will need to be instantaneous. So you can kind of hide that with like a I saw a GDC talk years ago where they talk about on I think it was World of Warcraft where you shoot your bow and the arrow just comes straight out and then in the drawing of the second arrow that's when they do their kind of big wind up but you feel like it happens every time so you can hide things like that um but yes your player attack should be instantaneous you want to make sure that even in your work and then showing off your kind of dodge windows in your enemy attacks will also show your consideration for the design because as game animators we have to kind of think about the design. We have to think about the the kind of the how the game should work rather than just how it looks, because gameplay animation is about gameplay after all. And if it feels good, then that's the main thing. Yeah,
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
great. So I'm going to jump quickly onto a final point on Reels because I'm rambling way more than I planned on. So just one more thing to add on to a reel for modern game animation is you have to really show that you are able to work with mocap, you have a willingness to work with mocap. It's kind of unavoidable. Games have such huge scope these days that getting things we need done is just not really going to be possible. Mocap uh, helps us focus our energy on the things that we really want to, so we can really polish the things that we want to be high intensity, really amazing keyframe animation. So I don't have to worry about doing 85 walk starts. I can just let the mocap do that. It's still going to need to be cleaned up, which is what we need to show a willingness and an ability to do. You can get it from a million different ways and places these days. Um, like there's even plugins for your phone that you can just record yourself. It's markerless and it gets something usable that you can clean up. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but just make sure you've shown that that's something that you want, you're able to work with. Um, so just a few more additional tips. They're mainly up. Oh, I've lost one of my pictures. It was a cool VFX, a cool VFX thing. I've already mentioned it, so don't worry about that. The main one that I want to mention on this is when you're presenting your gameplay work. Um, we want to just show as much as possible. If you've got it working in Engine, show it off like with every tool you possibly can. So this picture was showing a VFX streak of a weapon, like I've already mentioned. Add VFX streaks into your attacks. Um, it's there. It's possible. It only levels things up. When you're showing your gameplay working with all your animations. There's plugins you can get for things like OBS that'll hook up to your controller, like you see in this little GIF, that'll show your inputs as you're playing through your animations. So you can see it working as with your inputs. Um, and it'll only jump you up this kind of imaginary queue of people who are applying for these jobs, showing as much thought and effort put into your reel and how much it actually works as a game, which I think is super important. Um, and then yeah, presentation, seek out seek out reels that you think are just, fantastic reels. Look at the way they present things. Try to think about those. Try to think about the transitions, the cuts, the editing. These are all little polishy things, but always try to show things in HD, multiple angles, usually in the same window if possible. There's lots of things you can do in Maya to copy the polygons of an animation, duplicate it, rotate it, scale it so it's really small, so it looks like a multiple camera view. All very straightforward, but adds a lot. So the last section I want to jump into is the idea of how to think like a game animator. I'll go a little bit quickly because I could go down a rabbit hole with this, but I'm going to try and edit myself. So how we would look at what seemingly looks like a simple feature, and how would you think about, right, how if a designer or a creative director came to you and said, we want to do some ladders in our game, how would you think to break it down? This is basically a real thing that happened to me. So I thought we'd go through it. There's a lot of text. So if you feel like you need your eyes to glaze over and just listen, that's fine too. So we want to break it down. You have to, first of all, think about how you're going to approach it. What is the style of the game you're working on? How does our game handle interactions? So I've just recently got a PS5, so I've been able to start playing God of War Ragnarok. It's fantastic. But that's a really good example of a game that has really tightly controlled interactions. You press a button on, like say here, like a chain climb down or something like that, or even jumping over a gap. It's pretty much going to get you exactly where it needs to get you to play the animation that it needs to play to get you across. And it's super polished, really highly controlled, but may not work for, say, a multiplayer game, like a third-person multiplayer game. For the sake of this exercise, that's what we're going to go through, because it just is a massive like Pandora's box, basically. And I want to just show you how much you can just kind of keep going when someone goes, but what about if they do this, and what about if they do this, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And this is why, well, I'll get to the end of this, you go, oh yeah, mocap will be great. This will be a mocap feature, not so for the sake of this argument, yeah, we're going to assume a third person multiplayer game. So the metrics might be different, the situations might be slightly different, but for this ladder climb and not as tightly controlled, so we need a lot of coverage. So to start off with, we'll need, like say, your character on the ladder, we'll need ladder climb up. Let's say I like to break it up as speeds, but similar speeds that we can understand, like locomotion. So walk, jog, sprint. So either one will be like a walk, a slightly faster one if they press the stick all the way up, and then if they press sprint, there's no better feeling than when you press sprint on a ladder and your character just starts going as fast as they possibly can. It makes the player feel like, oh, I thought I could do this and I could do it. It's a really good feeling. So like I said, we get the ladder climb up walk. So we'll also need a ladder climb down walk. In a perfect world, these would start and end with the same pose. But that also means that if they start and end with the same pose, we have to climb up 2 rungs as one cycle. So what if we only want to climb up 1 rung? Now we've got the other hand up and the other foot up. So now we'll need an idle left and right with left hand up, right hand up, which means we also need a loop starting with the left hand up and a loop starting with the right hand up, a loop stopping with the left hand up, right hand up, down as well, and then for all of the speeds. This is a task that needs a lot of collaboration between design, animation, code, art. All of the sort of metrics of the game need to be really tightly controlled here, because if the rungs are slightly different heights on different ladders, things are going to get messy. If the props are placed around, say, the base of the ladder, then the approaches are going to get messy. If there's things at the top aren't the same, then the attachment is going to get crazy. So you need to have a lot of control and a lot of collaboration. You need to be constantly talking to all these departments. Everyone needs to be on the same page. So I've done this incredible diagram here just to show the approaches that we would usually expect. So if you well, I'll just start on the left-hand side, basically. Ignore that amazing art for now. We want to add starts and stops to all of these. So we don't just want it to just start playing, or as much as possible, you want the engine to not really be the one in charge of blending. Like you don't want Maya to be the thing in charge of, like you don't want to set a keyframe at 1, a keyframe at 20 and say, whatever happens, happens. I want to be in control of that. So we want to add our starts and stops from the left and the right for every speed. And whether that covers 1 or 2 rungs at a time, depending, that's even more complexity added. One of the cool ones that everyone always was fighting over animating is the ladder down sprint, where you just get to slide down. That's always one the mocap performers on the shoots love to do as well. They usually no, I'm doing the slide this time. And that's just like when you press sprint down and your character just starts sliding, it just feels great. So that's kind of covering being on the ladder. Now we need to look at getting on and getting off the ladder. So like you can see in the diagram, generally I would want kind of 5 angles of approach and 3 distances of approach. And each of these will need their own attach. So if a player is kind of running in from 45 degrees left at like full sprint and they press attach at about 2 meters away, we're going to start playing attach sprint left. And he'll probably jump onto the ladder, we'll have a cool bit of swing, and then they'll start climbing up. But if they're going slightly slower and they press attach, we'll play it from 1 meter away. Or if they're over here, we'll play it, we'll play the 90-degree right jog attach. Then at 0, 0, it's usually going to be an idle. Anything closer than the walk will usually be the idle attach. Then detaching will be from the bottom is usually we'll just go straight to idle. It'll be up to the designers and the animators have a conversation about whether or not you turn the player around when they hit the bottom. Because what if they want to hit the bottom and immediately go straight back up? What if they hit the bottom and they want to press forwards to run away? If they're still facing it, they're going to just run straight back into the ladder. But if they press forwards while they're facing away, then they're going to run away. It's a whole big thing. You can just go down these rabbit holes that maybe you really don't want to, but they're conversations that need to be had because eventually the problem's going to come up. So something else that you will really need to talk about with your designers is weapon, weapon stowing and equipping. And like I said earlier on, whenever you can kind of hide something in a game and people don't notice, it's fantastic. Especially in a fast-paced multiplayer game, running up to a ladder, a full sprint, and then you don't know if they're going to press attach until the last possible second. So having them put a big gun or axe or something on their back and then grab on, there's just not enough time to make it look good. So a lot of the time, what games will do is they'll just make the weapon invisible, and you'll just run up with your big sword, and you'll jump on, and you'll just be climbing the ladder. No one will ever notice that the weapon is not in your hand anymore. You'll get off the top, and you'll just have your sword again. You're like, yeah, that was really good. That was really fluid. So we've just managed to avoid having a massive issue with what do we do with the weapon? How do we get it back out? Like I said, this is really only an issue for kind of really fast-paced multiplayer games. Because at the end of the day, we want to make like the best playing experience possible and remove as many points of friction as we can. And if making the weapon invisible and nobody notices, then that's great. That's the perfect solution. So the next slide is basically, I went through and I wrote out, I actually felt like I was doing a lot of hard work for this because I wrote out every animation that you would need for this. So that's just for the ladder for one specific character. So imagine you had multiple characters that all had to move differently, enemies, everything. This is just one character. And it's 64 animations, which is a lot for one specific feature. But hopefully you get a better idea of how we might approach what seems like just climb up and down a ladder. It's like, yeah, but how? and how often and how fast and from what angle. Um, so that actually covers pretty much everything I had to say for the talk. Um, Hopefully everyone learned something. And if there's any more questions, Bo, happy to answer them.
We can definitely go over some more questions, but
Yeah.
that was amazing. The amount of animations for one character to climb one ladder is just like mind blowing.
I'm sure there's some animators watching this being like, well, I think you missed a bit there, and I think you probably could have got a bit
Yeah.
more there. And so,
If you want to really polish that
yeah, I mean, if
animation,
you
you
want
could
a
add like
basic one,
60
that's
more.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we do have a few more questions here, and not too much time left for the Q&A portion here. So let's just dive right in and see how
Yeah.
many we can answer. And I apologize, I've got a cat that's ready to jump out at me, so
I can see
I'm
you
trying
looking
to
a bit
keep him at
nervous. Yeah.
bay. Yeah, he keeps looking at me. So regarding the mocap that you were talking about, I never see mocap on reels or even mentioned. How do you properly show that you took mocap and made it into something special and didn't just put a mocap shot in there?
Yeah. So usually what I would do is in the, say, the top left-hand corner of your screen, maybe just scale it down to like 20%, have the original data, show how broken it was to show off how amazing your cleanup was. Just have it just in the top corner, just there's my window, just like right there, just a little tiny window, just show the pure unedited mocap, even the skeleton or hopefully retargeted onto your characters. You can see, you can show off just how much work you put in. That would be what I would do.
Nice. And regarding mocap, is it just a matter of cleaning it up and making it look polished, refined, or is it also exaggerating, pushing the timing, the spacing, the posing even, like just trying to capture more character within that mocap?
It really comes down to the style of what you're going for. If you're going for a super realistic, like you're trying to show that this is real, then you really want to capture the, especially if a studio has paid for a very high profile, say, actor, to play this character, you don't really want to be taking away from the performance that they've brought. You just want to get rid of the the noise and the issues. You want to be able to let that performance shine. But if you're doing things for a more stylized game that has mocap, then yeah, you're going to need to push it. You're going to stretch the timings. You're going to exaggerate things. But yeah, it's an annoying answer, but it depends.
It's a good answer. Uh, I especially when you're dealing with, oh, they hired this really big name actor. It does make sense that you wouldn't want to just replace them with something else.
Yeah,
So in your experience, what skills are feature trained animators missing that stops them from being hired and flourishing in game animation? There's a lot of people who have come up from just traditional animation styles, and when they're jumping into games, what would they need to focus on or kind of change their mentality on?
yeah. I would say it's getting things into engine, getting them working in engine, not being shy to dive into that technical side because um, there's a lot more that goes on in the game animation than just the animation. Like getting the animation out of Maya is really only half the work. Getting it shining in engine is a huge step, and you can feel like you're kind of sinking a lot of time into it, but it's worth it in the end because it's going to be what you're doing on the job. Um, so yeah, getting into engine, getting comfortable in engine, understanding how the state machines work, uh, and the engines are free. So that's whenever I see a games reel that doesn't have engine work on it, I'm like, what are you doing? That would be what I would say.
So that actually covers another question here about whether the reel should be rendered in DCC, in animation software, or in game engine. So do you feel that if you're going for a game reel, it is worth the time to just take that extra step and not just do a Maya Blast or a Blender render and actually go into Unreal or Unity and show it off in there,
Yeah,
in that
you
environment?
you can do both as well. You can show it off in Maya, get all your different angles, show it off in a nice play blast, but then be like, oh, by the way, here it is working perfectly in Engine. It's just a nice little touch on the end. You can do
Nice.
one. You can just do Engine, but if you want to do both, that's great too.
So is it worth it to just put like ideally, ideal world, having all of your animations in game engine showing it off in there, or is a mix just as good? Like,
A
for
mix
you,
is just
Play
as
Blast?
good because a lot of engine work will require you to like as a basic do a lot of work to actually get it working. But if you're like, I just want to show some cool combat things, that might not be the best thing. You can figure out how to make montages work in Unreal and things like that. Not necessarily have a full state machine, but at least get it show that you understand exporting and importing. So have it like in the animation sequence preview or something like that.
Nice. So you could just take the easy animations, put them in game engines, and the more complex ladder climbs, you could just make a Play Blast and not have to worry about
Yeah, just be
setting
like,
all
look,
of that up.
I know that this will work. Just I'm not making
Cool.
64 animations for my show reel.
Awesome. See, we've got a couple more questions here. We actually do have quite a few more, but unfortunately, not the time for it. Uh, so regarding kind of trying to jump into the industry, what would be the best method of trying to land your first game animation job? Should you be sending various applications, focusing on networking, just sending emails and pitching yourself to companies? Do you start from a QA position and work your way up? Or is it better to just kind of build your reel and showcase your skills? Or maybe a combination of all of those?
Yeah, I don't think there's no wrong answer there. They're all they're all very good options. I mean, getting into QA can be an excellent path of like understand like coming from QA, nobody will have a better understanding of how the game works than the QA department. That's a fact. So if you're an animator with a background in QA, you'll have a fantastic time breaking down features and understanding, debugging things. Like that's a huge skill in itself. Is putting an animation in an engine and it just doesn't work. Right? You're just going like, well, I don't know. If you can like really dive in and figure it out and fix it, that's fantastic. Um, but yeah, trying to get your foot in the door, it's there's there's no straightforward answer. It's just try your best, put your best foot forward. The work you put in will be worth it. Like every single little 1% that you feel like you can add to everything you do in your reel and upskilling in engine work and things like that, they'll all stand to you later on down the line. Um, One other thing, I would learn how to write a really good CV, not just like, oh, the CV is fine, whatever. Like a lot of systems now are, keyword detecting and things like that. Like get your CV to say what you want it to say so that they want to talk to you. You got to sell yourself. Um, that's what I would say.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing this talk. This was absolutely fantastic. And like the ending, again, the ending of that 64 animations is just like literally mind blowing. I'm still jumping back to that. It's just so you don't realize just how much goes into one feature of a game that most people just hit the button, climb the ladder, go, and then you're
Yeah.
gone. But so much thought and attention goes into making that feel good and
Hmm.
feel interesting. So yeah, beautiful talk. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for answering all of these questions. For everyone here, I know you have a lot of questions left. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through all of these, but if you do want to see another one of these webinars, definitely let us know and we can try to get back to all of these questions and give you a chance to answer or ask even more. Now, we will be going into a segment here where you can ask more questions regarding the Animation Mentor program, the game program within there, which covers a lot of the things that Luke just talked about here. Uh, but before we jump into that, again, Luke, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone had something to take away from it. It's kind of a bit scattershot with the tips I wanted to give out, but I was like, I need to hit everything. The questions were excellent. Made me really think about how much I missed in that talk, but excellent questions. I'm glad we were able to cover them. But yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. And is there any place that people can find you online if they want to check out your work or check out where you are? One
Yes,
place for anyone who wants to know is the Animation Mentor campus website. You can find Luke's profile on there if you want to see what he's worked on and kind of get access to everything.
yeah.
But any other areas you want to promote?
I'm if you wanna send me questions as well if there's things you really that you're like I didn't get answered and I really 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 want to know the answer. I'm on Twitter or X. my username is pretty weird. It's I fell into a well. I won't go into it, but if you can find me there, then I'll happily respond to anything as best I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and we really appreciate you doing all of this and taking all the time to do this.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, guys.
Cool. Awesome. So we're going to transition here to the Mars and Tim portion of the webinar. So if anyone has questions for the student success coaches at Animation Mentor, feel free to drop them in the Q&A panel there. Feel free to ask. And yeah, I'll let you guys take it away.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that was awesome.
It was.
Thank you to Luke. What a great webinar. I caught the tail end of it. I wasn't there the whole time, but now I feel like I really missed out. But yeah, I was even like you said, those 64 animations at the end, that was pretty crazy to see that. I was like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
a lot.
He's playing the right games too. God of War. I mean, come on.
Right? Well, yeah, just a quick introduction. Thanks to Bo. But yes, my name is Mars. I'm a student success coach here at Animation Mentor. And that other guy, who are you?
I'm Tim. I am also student success coach here at Animation Mentor. Love gaming to death. So
Nice.
yes, what Luke was saying is absolutely true, accurate, everything that he was saying. So super awesome. Armin, what's going on? You guys checking in? We got some people in there that are current AMers and then some that are starting AM coming up in January. So there's
Right.
some new community members in the mix there, which is kind of cool.
Yes. Hey, Talia. Yeah, really awesome to be here. And yeah, this portion is really all for you guys. If you have any questions about what Animation Mentor actually is, we've been doing these awesome free webinars monthly, which I know a few of you have been coming to more than one of these. So glad to see you back here. But Animation Mentor is much more than just free webinars.
Yeah.
It goes a whole lot deeper than that. A lot of our mentors are actually former students as well. So, our graduates are working in the industry. They're teaching here as well. And we have the courses to get you prepared for, working in the industry. So yeah, these webinars are a good start. But if you really want to take it to that next level, we've got classes here. We've got, 3D animation is our specialty, character animation, feature film, games, all that sort of stuff. We've got short courses like the 6-week ones. And we've got a full 18-month 3D character animation and game animation program as well. So lots of really exciting courses here.
Yeah, and hey, Michael, welcome. First one you've been to since graduating. We have a lot of these things, as Mars was mentioning, and a lot of them, if you've missed these in the past, and this is your first one, they're all there's links for all of these so that you can go back in and revisit them. There's the Nicole Hare Maya one. There's the Brendan Gottlieb. I think it was lip sync and acting. I mean, there's just like a ton of them. So this is great stuff, and it's a real good sort of like way to test out the waters, right, with Animation Mentor, because what you see in these webinars, these workshops, basically, this is just what you're getting when you're going to class, with the exception of a lot less people, right? We like to put usually 9 students or so in a class, and so this thing had like 5,000 people or so showing up to it, which is amazing to have that many people jumping into this. And so it was really useful stuff. And like Mars was saying, there's a lot of courses that you can take with us, whether it be cartoony animation. Golly, we also offer a game animation fundamentals course. If you're not really familiar with game animation and you also want to kind of just try some stuff out, check out our game animation fundamentals 6-week course. It's a good way to test it out. They're doing Maya, they're doing Unreal in that thing. And then maybe dive into the full-on game character animation program after that. That's usually the next course in line for that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Caitlin was asking, where can you find the previous webinars? Those live on our blog site. So if you go to animationmentor.com, check out the blog site. I have a feeling my friends are just going to put a link there soon. So
yeah, there'll be one coming.
And then Jock's got a question. Do Animation Mentor courses give a degree? I'm looking for a master's degree in game animation.
Good question.
That is more practical. Yeah, great question, Jock. So Animation Mentor, what we focus on here is really the demo reel. And talk to any professional animator like Luke or anybody else working in the industry, degrees, diplomas, certificates, bachelor's, masters, don't get me wrong. Those are really wonderful academic achievements. Yeah. But what a hiring studio is really going to be looking for is that's, studio ready demo reel. And that's, that's what we're helping with here. So, you're learning directly from
term. Proofs in the pudding.
You stopped me in my tracks there. But it's true. It really is. You know, I mean, you can have a piece of paper that says, yeah,
Yeah.
I've got a master's, but you got to back it
Show
up.
me.
You know, this is visual arts.
Yeah.
Exactly. You get
Let me
so
see a reel.
and again, not trying to discourage you from a master's, but that's what we do here is we help prepare students for jobs in the industry by helping them prepare that demo reel. Now you do get a certificate though. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. At the end of the 18-month program, absolutely, you have a certificate. Again, great academic achievement. It shows that you've completed that full program.
Yep.
But you know, the hiring studios, they're going to want to see that work.
Yeah, and lifetime that certificate's cool. Lifetime, login credentials to the student campus, the
Oh yeah,
community, the
access.
job board. That is also something that comes at the end. Jules had a good one too. Are the courses full time, or is it possible to take them on the side while having a full time job? Jules,
Great one.
that's probably one of the most common questions that we get. I would say the majority of our students are juggling both. Right, they're working, they're taking courses. You know, if you're in one of our character animation program, that's a tiered curriculum. So you have to pass class 1 to get to class 2. So
Right.
naturally, you're only taking one course at a time in that thing anyway. If you're taking one of our 6-week or 12-week courses that are sort of singular, you can stack. So you can take like storyboarding and visual development at the same time and do that. But long answer to your short question. Yeah, most of our students are juggling jobs and taking classes with us as well. It's all about time management, man.
Yeah, exactly. Karina's got a good one here. So would you say a degree is unnecessary to excel in the field? Interestingly, I don't know if you remember this, Tim, but maybe a few years back, DreamWorks actually had a pretty cool post on LinkedIn, and somebody had asked them similar question: do I need a degree to actually become an animator? And DreamWorks replied, it was really cool to see that, saying there's lots of other ways to prepare for a career in the industry. And they actually named us. That was cool too. They called us out. They said you could learn online at schools like Animation Mentor.
Yeah.
So that's kind of pretty cool to get a shout out directly from DreamWorks. But yeah, I don't think that it's a necessary requirement. I think that things are changing quite a bit. I know even big companies like Apple and Google, dropped degree requirements for jobs and stuff like that there. So I think, especially in visual arts, like you said, like Tim said, proof's in the pudding.
Proof's in the pudding. Yari, for someone who's already had an associate's degree in animation, what kind of courses can I do with Animation Mentor to help get that extra help? That's a great one. And for somebody like you that has an associate's degree, you probably have a demo reel, right? And in this situation, to kind of figure out where we would place you to kind of give you the best tip on where to start with us, what we do is it's called advanced placement. And that's where a student such as yourself would submit an application, you add your demo reel link. What Mars and I will do is take that link, we'll send it over to one of our mentors. They're going to review your work. They're going to look at your reel. They're going to frame by frame it. They're going to zoom in. They're going to do all the things to kind of figure out what looks good with your work, what needs help with your work. And then you're going to get a recommendation that says, hey, based upon what we see with your work, I think you're going to be best suited to start off here. And then that way we can put you in a class that matches your skill set and your creativity level with your demo reel. I think that's a good way to go. But if you're just looking for, just courses to take, with us, cartoony animation is a really cool course. It's a 6-week course that you can take with us. It's not specific to game animation, but it's going to teach you some of that super exaggerated movement in your animation, which can definitely carry over into the game stuff too.
Yeah. Mark Hofdahl's awesome mentor. Really cool guy. Francois's got another one here. Do you offer help to find a job outside of the US after a game program? Good question there. So what we do is we have, first off, we really help you build that studio ready demo reel, and we provide a number of different career resources. So we have some amazing job boards. These things are updated all the time. Daily, even I've seen up to 50 jobs listed per day, and they're all around the world. They're not just in the U.S. I've seen countries all over the place.
Yeah, I was on there today, and there's a ton that are international on there. I saw some Osaka, Japan on there too. That I was like, oh, nice. That's awesome. And a lot of them that I looked at today were game animation specific, which was cool.
And I was going to say it's not just 3D character or feature animation, but it's also game animation. I've seen storyboard jobs on there. I've seen 2D animation jobs on there. So the job boards. Plus, we do webinars. We've got webinars with visiting artists, very similar to this. There's ones that are exclusive for our animation mentor students and graduates and alumni. You know, and I've even seen, you know, we've had some different talks with recruiters from time to time as well. So some really great resources. And then, you know, the actual community itself, you know, you're learning directly from pro animators who are currently working in the industry. What a resource, you know. So, I mean, you can ask, you know, those types of questions in your live classes with these mentors about, you know, what are they looking for? You know, a lot of our mentors, they're not just professional animators. A lot of them are senior level animators, maybe a lead animator, maybe even a director of character animation. So a lot of the mentors that teach here are in hiring positions. So they're really great people to talk to find out more about, you know, the hiring process and what to do.
And look who's back. Nicholas dropping in the comment. Nicholas, alumni here and now be back on campus for the Winter Creatures Locomotion. Can't
Nice.
wait. Dude, that's
Hey,
amazing. That's the class that's starting January 6th. You're going to have a blast inside of that class. So cool. Hopefully you utilized your alumni discount, because that's also available for the Creatures course. So he's doing it the right way. Right, the
yeah,
cartooning workshop and then doing Creatures Locomotion. And maybe you'll come back in the spring and take the fight or flight. We don't know. Welcome back, Nicholas.
that's awesome. Hey, Nicholas. Very, very cool. Well, let's see. I don't think you covered this yet, but you know, where do people start off? You know, if they're brand new to animation and they don't know, you know, we talk to students like that all the time, you know, and they're like, "Hey, I want to do this. I don't have any experience yet." Or sometimes I talk to students that are like, "Oh, you know, I'm going to need to get some experience before I come to Animation Mentor." That's not necessary. We can teach you from the very, very beginning.
No
And where
doubt.
does it all start? It starts with learning Maya. So, you know, if you're, you know, don't know where to start, that's a really, really great class. It's a 6-week Maya animation course where we're going to teach you all the basics of Maya. You know, it's really a course about learning the Maya interface. What's the graph editor? How do you do poses? How do you set keyframes? Stuff like that, really to get you familiar with the software. And you learn quite a bit in 6 weeks. I mean, by the time you're done with that course, you could do a handful of simple animations. And it's a preparatory course for our 3D character animation courses. So whether or not you want to do character animation program or the game animation program, it really all starts off with that course.
No doubt. Maya is definitely the key to that. People like Nicholas that, you know, is an alum now he's come back to take creature stuff, you know, they go through those courses, right? And when they, you know, after the Maya course is done, you got to submit your application to the school, right? So if you're going through character animation for film and for TV shows, or if you're doing the game animation track, you need to have an application that's submitted, you know, through the website. It's pretty basic stuff that we're looking for. We're looking for you to list your Maya experience. It's either none, below average, average, good, or the unicorn, which is excellent, right? You know, right, that's the unicorn. And then we're also looking for an essay. We want you to write an essay that tells us why you want to become an animator. Don't you Chat GPT us either, please. Go ahead and write that, because animation is all about storytelling. So we love it when people are telling their story, you know, in their essay, because it helps us to get to know you. Mars and I reach out to you. We actually will call you, we'll text you, we'll WhatsApp you. We actually will do this exact same thing that we're doing now. We don't just do it for these things. We're going to help you to kind of get through this program, follow you through the registration process, follow you on campus. We'll be commenting on your shots and making sure that you know exactly what you're doing. So if you're, you know, not familiar with animation and you're like, I just want to get started, you know, doing the Maya course and submitting your application are kind of those steps that you need to take.
Yep, and send us a message directly too. If we'll be mentioning our contact information, but send us some direct, you know, information before you sign up, because we may have a promo code for you for your first class. So
we might. And Caitlin, no, we don't have a physical campus. We're in the cloud, right? So you know, but you know, when prior to COVID, right, everybody kind of changed the game. We were out in Emeryville, California, which Emeryville is, you know, also home to Pixar, right? We were a short walk down the street from where Pixar was, matter of fact. And summer Thai food, it was so good. I remember.
Oh, that was good. You could smell the fresh baked animation coming from Pixar.
You could
It
smell
good.
that fresh baked stuff every single day, and it was inspiring. So, but now we're all in the cloud, kind of doing this stuff. So I know we're ridiculous.
1234 Digital Street, and here we are. Cool. Jay's got a question. Do the 2D animation courses come with a software like the 3D course has Maya for free? Good question. So we're actually an authorized Autodesk learning partner. So that's pretty special. We've got a special relationship with Autodesk. So you are right. And that's important to note too, is that we do offer Maya for free with our courses. Some students get a little discouraged and they're like, oh, I'd love to come there, but I can't afford Maya. Well, don't worry. We actually provide it to our students for free. Now, we're really known for being a 3D character animation school. 2D animation, we cover that, but we only have a couple of courses, so we don't have the same relationship with Toon Boom that we do with Autodesk. And so you do need to purchase that software, but there's some other options too. There's Rough Animator as well. So there's some pretty low cost options. You don't necessarily need to have Toon Boom Harmony, but I do think it's like $20 a month. So it's pretty affordable for most students compared to Autodesk Maya, and then I think Rough Animator is like $6 or something like that.
Yeah,
So
super cheap. Yeah, good one. Jacques Gilbert, I hope I did that right, has a question. Does knowledge in Blender translate to Maya? You know what? It's funny you should mention that, because I have had some Blender students that have come over to the dark side and are now learning Maya, and they said a lot of the stuff has been pretty transferable and translatable from one to the other. It's kind of like having two cars, right? They're both going to get you to the store. One's a stick shift, one's an automatic with more things and bells and whistles. That's Maya over there on that side, right? Everybody who kind of knows a little bit more in the industry's got a lot more sportiness to it. But, you know, once you start picking up some of those differences and kind of understanding, well, the graph editor's this and Maya, what's it over here, right? And so, yes, totally transferable, Jacques. So if you are a Blender user, come on over to the dark side.
Come on over. You must be into cars or something.
Yeah.
You know, funny enough, I was totally random. I was watching a YouTube video last night on how a clutch works. It was really interesting. It was like this engineering video. So it was really
that
kind of
cool.
nerdy car stuff.
I got some car knowledge a little bit here and there.
Makai, hey, good to see you again.
What's up, Makai?
He's always here. We appreciate having you. Hopefully we'll have you in a class sometime soon.
Yep.
Cool. What else? Any other questions?
Yeah. Inmatezones.org. What are the costs, please, for everything? And is anything monthly or yearly? Yeah, there's a lot of different pricing points on our courses, and there's a lot to give you here. There's probably going to be a link going to be thrown up there pretty soon. But you know, 6-week courses for like Cartoony or Maya or storyboarding, those have a different price point than say our main 12-week courses. You know, the 12-week courses are really what our students come here for, right? If they want to go through a program from, you know, the basics and principles all the way to feature animation, acting, and polish, or, you know, the game animation cinematic side of things, then that pricing point is different. There are payment plans for our 12-week courses though, which is convenient. So that's super helpful on that. So there'll probably be a link coming up here pretty soon, but the price points are super different from all these courses.
Yeah, there's ranges of them. And like I tell students all the time, you know, speak with us first. Don't just sign up. You know, let's chat. I mean, you could certainly just sign up. Don't get me wrong, but chat with us. You know, we'll work with you too. There's, you know, sometimes we have various promos and deals going on. So. Speaking of, also any promotions for nonprofit public charities, nothing specifically for that, but if you are interested in courses, you should definitely speak with us. Also, we do provide, you know, courses at special rates for businesses and studios, you know, so that's another area that we work with is studio training. You know, I've definitely worked with a handful of studios here. That's one of the other things that I do here as a studio training advisor is actually work directly with studios that are looking to upskill their animators, you know, so I'm not sure if that applies to what you're looking for, but you should definitely speak with us if you are interested for, you know, training for your particular group or nonprofit. You know, we could talk about that.
Yeah, and Nicholas even said it right here, you know, talking from experience, if you know how to animate in Blender, you'll learn to animate in Maya like nothing. So that's cool. It's good to know.
Yep.
Cool.
Good questions. Cool. Anything else? Getting ready for the holidays, Tim?
Salvador checking in from Mexico.
Nice.
Hello.
You're very welcome. Cool. I think we might be fresh out of questions, Bo. What do you think?
Looks like sorry, I was answering a bunch of the tech questions from earlier. So I was just typing away. So if there's no other questions, we can call it here. Thank you all so much for hanging out, for taking the time to ask all of your questions. Once again, if you would like to see more of these on a specific topic, or again, just on this awesome topic, definitely just let us know. And it'll give us some more ideas and ways to prep for future webinars. And thank you, Mars and Tim, for taking the time to answer your questions. As always, it's always nice to see you both.
Thanks for
And
having us.
it's
Awesome.
always a pleasure. So, with that, thank you all so much, everyone. Hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. For those of you in Animation Mentor, hope you have a wonderful holiday break before the next term. And yes, hopefully we'll see you all in the next webinar. So
Thanks, guys.
take care, everyone.
Bye now.
Happy holidays.